welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Bud Elliott. That's Danny Cannell. That's Tom Fernelli. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live, youtube.com/Cover3 and on Facebook. Thanks to everybody who's joining us live, hanging out. We can see the chat's already popping. Good afternoon to you. Make sure that you smash that like button. It helps us be able to grow the show and let more people know about this awesome stuff that we got going on at the Cover 3 podcast. Subscribe also on YouTube so that you just get an alert anytime that we go live. Smash that bell for those notifications. Very exciting Monday show for you. Before we get out of here, we're going to be taking a tour around the country, checking out some of the quarterback battles that we're keeping our eyes on here in spring practice. A little bit of transfer portal news, as is this time of year. But we begin with a little bit of breaking news as the 5-star quarterback Nico Iamaleava has committed to Tennessee. Now, his name has been mentioned and pronounced perhaps poorly by me already on this podcast before, as we discussed the idea of the $8 million NIL deal, the laws in the state of California that allow some of this money to even start to be given or provided to the prospect. Checks to be cashed, even while you are still a junior in high school. Let's go ahead and let's start with the prospect himself, because I think that our discussion was really more about, NIL and what this represented. I didn't have enough knowledge, and I still don't now. So, Bud, I ask, what is Tennessee getting in Nico Iamaleava?
They're getting a really, really talented quarterback, a quarterback prospect who, even though we have Arch Manning this year, and we also have Malachi, he could end up number 1 overall in the country, rankings-wise. A really talented men's volleyball player, which you don't see a lot, but those guys, if you're a really good volleyball player, you're a very athletic prospect. You probably have really good body control, which he does. You can see that when he throws off platform. Pretty smart kid. I know one of his coaches, and they love the guy. And quite honestly, guys, I wasn't on the episode when we discussed it, but I think $2 million a year for a 5-star quarterback prospect is a freaking steal. Like, that is cheap. Think about what 18-year-olds in these other sports get. I was playing golf yesterday with a buddy of mine, and he's a pretty big Major League Baseball agent. Number 1 pick in the baseball draft gets $9 million bucks.
Yeah.
$9 million.
Should we propose a system where your pay is based on where you're rated as a prospect? Because then we could finagle things to where, maybe 24/7 takes a little cut. Hey, we'll put you up a star.
If coaches get contract bonuses based on recruiting classes, and you can then get that, work the recruiting service to get higher rated prospects so that your contract bonus is cash. If that's already in the ecosystem, Tom, I don't think it's crazy for us to try to also link this into NIL deals. To which my motivation is, it's y'all's money. So that's the thing about $2 million a year is whose money is it? Who's this being judged against? This is so early that I don't know if that's a steal or if it's not a steal. I can tell you that it sounds like a really big number compared to what
zero.
Compared to what other NIL numbers we've even heard from this past cycle, $1 million a year. It's going to be $1 million a year. Now all of a sudden we're up to 2. I think that it might be a steal. I just don't have enough information to be able to create brackets on this.
I also think it's important to note that if the rumors of this deal are true, this is the entirety of his NIL rights, whereas we only heard about Bryce Young's $1 million deal, right? That doesn't mean that Bryce Young isn't getting other NIL deals. So I don't know that it's entirely fair to assume that this is double what Bryce is getting. Right. My guess here is that there are other stuff in the works there for other quarterbacks, whereas this is the entirety of your name, image, and likeness rights being signed away. So just want to point that out. Look, think about it. In what other sport, like in the NFL, does any assistant coach make anywhere close to what the top quarterback draft picks make? No. I'd rather have a 5-star quarterback than any coordinator you can name, because the replacement level for these coaches is just not that high. The drop-off in terms of talent for the very best players is huge. The players are more valuable to me than the coaches are.
Jordan's in the chat just Lighting things on fire.
Yes, there we go.
Producer Jordan, what's up?
That's outstanding. I'm with you, bud. I think Aaron Rodgers is underpaid. He's just signed for 45, 50 million a year. Like, it's the most important position in the game if you get it right. I think that's probably the thing that I think people are struggling with is the crapshoot. Like, hey, is this going to be the next sure thing, or could this be the next? Is it going to be the next Bryce Young, or is it going to be the next DJ Uiagalelei? Like, and maybe
is that
DJ
priced in? Because, like,
maybe.
hypothetical, if you could tell Auburn, who we're going to discuss later in the show, you can get that 1 year Cam Newton. How much do you think they really would have paid before they said no? 20 million?
Right.
Saban makes what, 12 a year? If you count in the house and the life insurance policy and stuff? I think Auburn would drop 20 if they could.
I mean, if they're
get that 1 year.
They're
think
right.
about what they paid to get rid of coaches.
Right.
You.
Exactly. So I think the risk is priced in at $2 million a year.
I think
if you knew that he was going to hit, if there was no doubt that he's going to be an absolute stud for you, $2 million is much cheaper than it should be.
And this is actually, I mean, this is how it's supposed to work, right? In America, where it's the law of supply and demand. And I think it will be interesting because much like if you go into, if you go at your buddy who's an agent, I guarantee he has every single draft slot. He's got it slotted for how much they're supposed to get for signing. Now, teams have already kind of had, on some really backroom wall, they've had a number in mind for a 5-star QB, 5-star offensive line, 5-star defensive line, 4-star, 3-star, and they've had numbers in mind that are kind of very rough estimates, but it's like, hey, here's what we're willing to go for that. The more we get, the more information we get, and the more we get these deals that are out in the public and they get published, the more that the next 5-star, like Arch Manning, he'll be like, hey, that guy just got 8. That's my number, bottom line. If you want me to go there, you've got to get it and maybe bump it up some. And like every other sport, it'll probably keep increasing, over time because there'll be one of these guys will hit it big. And the reason it's a bargain is, go back and look at any of the studies that were done on Johnny Manziel, then the value that he brought to Texas A&M and how they raised, $400 million because of his Heisman season. And that was the amount of pledges they got from, the school. And that's only that number. That doesn't include any other number that comes to the program. If you're talking about bowl appearances, better bowls, playoff appearances, and the national championship run, then you're talking that's absolutely a bargain if you hit on it.
My concern, I don't disagree with anything you guys are talking about as far as the value and how much he's worth. We really don't know. It's going to be up to each school depending on how much they feel like spending. That's how much he's worth. My concern, though, and I wonder if you guys have any, is he's stepping into a situation where he's Tennessee's first 5-star QB since 2002, I think it was.
Yep.
So there's already tons of pressure on him to be a savior now because that's how he's going to be looked at. Like, this is the guy. We're going to be back. We're going to compete with Georgia to win the East. We've got the QB. And now you add the $8 million or $2 million a year on top of it. I worry about the kind of pressure he's going to be facing from the fan base if he doesn't perform well right away. And I worry what kind of impact that's going to have on some of these kids. Now, granted, they've had to deal with that already. And now they're going to be getting well compensated for it. So it helps. I just worry about how fans are going to react. Like, guys like Jordan Mayton are super excited now, but what's to keep them from burning down Nico's house? Because we know Jordan likes to light things on fire.
Well, that's a part of becoming, because I think even I've noticed this as an analyst, covering both the NFL and college football. I feel like I'm a little gentler at college football. But it's only going to be human nature to be like, well, that guy's now making millions, so we can just light into him. And I think we already saw that somewhat with Spencer Rattler when they were chanting Caleb Williams' name from the stands. But again, that's happened before, so they've already, fan bases can be pretty hostile to their own players as it is. But I think it's only going to increase that likelihood. That and gambling too. That was always the people that got the maddest at me were the drunk phone calls from some guy who just lost on Florida State. That's when I had to realize, all right, I have to lose my number and get a new one and have it unlisted in the Tallahassee phone book.
You only won by 6 points, you idiot.
So I'm trying to remember this. When were the first guys drafted straight out of high school into the NBA, and then they got those huge deals? Like, obviously we remember Kevin Garnett and Kobe.
Yeah.
Was KG the first?
think KG was like, because it used to happen like in the 70s, but nobody cared then because nobody was making any money. But yeah, I think in the big money era of the NBA, like the post Jordan, when it became a popular league, it was probably KG, I think.
But then weren't there a couple like notable busts, and that was one of the reason they went back to the one and done rule, was because there were guys, because that's going to happen. There are going to be busts in college football as well. It's just inevitable. There is no perfect way to predict who's going to do what. I mean, we've already seen that. Again, a couple examples earlier on the show. And the thing that's crazy is in the examples of Spencer Rattler and DJ Uiagalelei, they had both. Spencer Rattler in particular had played a full season of really good football, and you saw it not work out. And it's the same thing. Like we've seen a lot of pick your NFL guy that's made like Matt Flynn, who made, he played in a handful of games. Seattle paid him, and then Russell Wilson beats him out. There's going to be stories like that happen, but I think that's just part of players getting paid. It's always been a part of professional sports, and that's what we're seeing, the morphing into college football into being a professional sport.
Last
I
thing
also don't know. Or sorry, Chip.
I was just going to say, so what about the rest of Tennessee's recruiting efforts?
Well,
are you asking if they're tapped?
Well, I mean, if
they got that 25 mil. That got that war chest.
If Josh Heupel is, out on the recruiting trail right now, and he's starting to talk to some parents, or he's starting to talk to some players, or he's starting to talk to the other important influencers around a prospect. I mean, it's like that was the old price, right? Like, what if we thought we'd had something agreed upon, and then I see this $8 million. It's like, well, now let's talk more about that war chest that I've been reading about right now. Not that signing a 5-star quarterback should only be sending the signal that you're going for it and that we are ready to win big. That should be a motivating factor. I imagine it won't be for everyone, but a overall plus value. I mean, is there any negative kickback on the recruiting trail as Heupel tries to spin this thing forward, secure the rest of the class, and the final and hardest step, actually convert recruiting wins into SEC wins?
So I think this helps them quite a bit, obviously, because I really didn't think that staff was a great recruiting staff prior. I was not really impressed with what the majority of those guys did when they were at UCF. Certainly Malzahn is recruiting better at UCF than this group of coaches did there. And they don't really have reputations as great recruiters, but this will help you quite a bit. As far as challenges, as Chip asked for, one of the challenges is going to be not every state is California. The majority of states, you cannot sign a high school kid to an NIL deal. Now, I think that's going to change pretty quick across the landscape in some states. But some states will probably drag their feet and say no, which is fine, right? That's state sovereignty. I mean, different states have different rules. It's kind of one of the things that makes our country cool. But ultimately, that could be a challenge. Hey, like we could do this deal because in California it's legal. But in your situation, you have to just kind of believe us that the deal is going to be there when you get on campus, right? So that could be a challenge. But it also, I think the proof of concept and the positive PR they're getting out of this is tremendous for recruiting, right? Like, hey, this is real. We're getting write-ups all across the country and all the media outlets. So I think it'll help them quite a bit. And they seem to be, at the forefront of some of this. And so perhaps Florida and Georgia may have a little more company in that division than they would like.
I wonder if we're going to see, and we kind of see it already too, like with IMG, but I wonder if as these rules take time to get implemented in certain states and whether or not they are or aren't, if we're going to see like a wave of top recruits transferring high schools. Like, are we going to see somebody transferring to a state in which they can get paid right away so that way they could accept their deal before making their college commitment?
If you're good enough to get a deal, like a big time deal, absolutely, I think you should.
I mean, if you magically need to be at close to a regional airport so that John Calipari can get from Lexington to Greensboro instead of Little Washington, North Carolina, then hey, you wait till the high school coach goes on spring break and we get the transfer papers through.
It'll definitely happen. I think what's interesting too, do you think, because I think this is the other side, the boosters and the businesses figuring things out a little bit too, is that this is a multi-year deal. But I'm curious to know what happens if it doesn't work out. Like, do we see potential buyouts, from another school like we do with coaches? Like, let's say this kid doesn't work out and he's not starting, or he starts 6 games and it's disaster. Sorry, Jordan. And then something doesn't go well. Is the money guaranteed for the player? Can the boosters get out of it? And on the flip side, like what if another school, let's say he was on the bench and Hendon Hooker came back and the kid had a desire to get out and he went to Florida or Georgia and said, hey, I really want to come play for you. Like, I wonder if there's a buyout scenario where Florida or Georgia says, what do you have left? All right, we'll give you that. And then, we'll pay Tennessee their, out fee, and then we'll pay you a new deal. Like, that's the whole thing about this that just nobody knows. But I think it's the wild, wild west aspect. And it's the term that everyone keeps throwing out there, but it's so appropriate because it truly is.
Little bit of transfer portal action from across the country. And right after we spent all this time talking about Ulysses Bentley, Kamar Wheaton, whether you want to get the proven product with the lower ceiling or whether you want to invest in the high ceiling option. And Tom Fornelli says, you know what? We might be seeing that Ulysses Bentley wasn't just, leaving because he was thinking that he's about to get passed over. He might have also had another, SEC team sniffing around. So, Tom, what's Lane Kiffin saying in the text to you as Ulysses Bentley has wound up now committed to Ole Miss? I think an hour after we got done recording, it seemed like.
I can't divulge the secrets of my text. No. Lane Kiffin has never texted me. He can, Lane, if you want. It's fine. Tell me anything you want. But no,
He's more of a DM guy, really.
Yeah, that was just mostly an educated guess in that he's a really good player. And SMU probably didn't want to lose him. And I didn't think he was leaving SMU because he didn't think he'd be able to, get an opportunity there. I think it was just obviously he felt there was a better opportunity somewhere else. And now we know what that better opportunity was. I think it's good for Ole Miss because, they lose Ely, so they've got an opening there. And that's an offense that I think fits a lot of what Ulysses Bentley was doing at SMU and a lot of his talents to begin with. So I think just as a move that makes a ton of sense for both parties.
Thoughts on Bentley? Yeah.
I feel like I didn't think it was a big deal that he was leaving at all. He got a bet. I think, and that's unfortunately, I think that's what we're going to see is that just organically, we're going to see sort of, AAA, AA, single A, like we see in baseball. And the better you play at single A, you get bumped up to AA. And then the better you play at AA, you get bumped up to, AAA. And if AAA, you get bumped up to the big leagues. I think that's what we're going to see. And probably what you're going to see is, I don't know if it's by conference, but, the top 20 spending teams are going to be the big leagues. And that's where you go. And some will be in the SEC, some Big 10. A handful in the Pac-12, Big 12, and ACC, and the rest fall by the wayside wherever they go.
And that's another thing, too. Like, I got into this debate over the weekend plenty of times because of the NCAA tournament going on, which ultimately leads to this is why the football playoff needs to expand because it helps, democratize things. And it's like, no, it's like basketball and football are so different in the way that the teams work, the games work, and everything's constructed. Whereas there's more opportunity for basketball teams, but in football, like NIL and expanding the playoffs, like I've said before, so we won't go on too long, but it's just going to funnel all the power to the same schools and just separate things even, make the distance even greater.
So
I'm just saying I think like the greatest, analogy here is just, it's going to become like AA and AAA just like it is for coaches.
Yeah.
Right. We'll do who's next on the coaching list. Right. They don't show any loyalty to the schools.
And you go to the Big 10.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. Nobody expects those coaches to stay in the MAC or the Sun Belt or whatever. Like, I don't expect the players to either. If we missed on them out of high school, recruiting wise, or maybe we didn't miss, maybe they just grew a ton once they got into college. Move up, man.
And just like the minor leagues, the lower teams become a combination of grizzled veterans hanging on and young guys that are late bloomers and hoping to hit their stride.
It's going to be 26-year-old quarterbacks throwing to 18-year-old wide receivers.
What's going to be interesting is who thinks they're the big leagues and finds out they aren't, or how does that, because they really, I don't think it'll be by conference. Like, look at Pat Narduzzi's comments on Jordan Addison. Like, hey, people are calling my receivers. And if you're Jordan Addison, you're probably like, yeah, I love it here. We'll show them, like, keep me here, but you got to pay to keep me here because I'm getting these pretty good offers from these other places. So it's a wild time. It's crazy.
So this is not a question from the big old bag of mail. It's more from the swollen, sleep deprived brain of Chip. But the NCAA tournament unlike the NFL playoffs, allows for these unique scenarios like Iowa State and Miami are going to play in a Sweet 16 game, and the winner's going to go to the Elite Eight, guaranteeing that a double-digit
we're rooting
seed
for Miami. You know
will
that.
be in the Elite Eight. And if you were to reseed that in the entire 1 through 16, a feature that you can probably read on CBSSports.com in the next 2 hours, you would find that Iowa State and Miami are in like the bottom 4. The bracket can break your way such that all of a sudden your path to be able to reach the Final Four is much easier. I think that it brings up an interesting debate for the college football playoff and the 12-team playoff because the NFL avoids some of this with the reseeding process. So if you're looking at maybe what you would want as a fan or what you think it would be better for the playoff in general, if we're in a 12-team format, which would include that first round, then playing into the quarterfinals with the 4 byes, would you like to see a reseeding process before we get into the quarterfinals, or would you like it to have that NCAA tournament quirk, which could be a selling point in that if you get the certain number of upsets in the right way, then all of a sudden things could become very favorable for you as a lower seed to be able to make a deep run.
I like that the NFL reseeds in its playoff because I do think that you should reward the teams for having success in the regular season by giving them the quote unquote easier path. But I think if your goal of expanding the playoff is to increase kind of, upsets, drama, open the door for other programs, if you do reseed, then you're just going to make it easier for the number 1 team to get to the final and then ultimately end up winning the championship game, which I think, from a pure best team should win perspective, that's what you want. If you want entertainment and chaos, I'm not sure that's the best option. But what I would do is I would ask, if we go to a 12-team format and 4 teams get a bye, before the first round of games start, I would secretly do a ballot with the 4 teams that got a bye, and I would say list in order of these 8 teams who you want to face the most to who you want to face the least. And then you would turn that into the College Football Playoff Committee. And then after those first 4 games are settled, then you announce the pairings based on who the number 1 team wanted to play, who the number 2 team wanted to play, and so on, and just go based off of that. I think that would be a lot more fun.
I really don't have a take. Like, it's fine either way, I guess.
I think it's about worthy champion and whether you want the college football playoff to award a worthy champion or the winner of the playoff. Because the NCAA tournament does not reward the best team in college basketball. It rewards the team that won the tournament. And as the entire college basketball season, the reason why it all points towards the NCAA tournament is we've decided that's what matters. It's why certain coaches, even with all their regular season wins, their fans are furious at them because they want to see more tournament success. We've just decided that winning the tournament is what matters in the sport. And I think that the expansion of the college football playoff is going to bring everything that we've seen from the first 7 seasons of the college football playoff. We're like, man, it seems like we're focused too much on the playoff. We're focused too much on the playoff. Expand that sucker, and the playoff will become the center of college football. So do you want to award our championship in the sport of college football based on who wins the playoff or based on who's the best team? I'm in favor of a reseeding after the first round with the idea that we are just trying to up the level of worthiness for the champion.
Am I the only one that's just learning that they reseed in the NFL? Because like having played in it and having covered it from a long time.
Is there
so
a
you're just saying, but like from your perspective, you're talking about how the higher speed gets to host, right? Is that basically what you're talking about?
No, whoever is the lower seed coming out of the wild card goes to the top seed in the next round.
Okay.
Yeah, like if the 7 seed wins its wild card game, they're playing the number 1 seed in the next round. That's how the NFL does it.
Right.
If in all the first round games in the 12-team model, the way it's set up with 4 byes, let's just say that the only lower seeded team that wins happens to be the one that in a bracket format would play into the number 4 seed. A reseeding process would then take that lower seed, and instead of playing the number 4 seed, they would then go up to play the number 1 seed.
I like chaos, so I'll take the leave it as it is.
Yeah, see, I like I said, I think that leaving it just...
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I interrupted you.
Well, I was going to say, if you're the best team, you'll win no matter who you're playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I only think that, like, no matter what format you go with, one of the top 2 teams is going to win every year. let's be realistic. It's going to be Alabama, Georgia, whoever the best team is that year will end up winning, because football is not a sport that lends itself to a lot of upsets, because, it's like in the basketball tournament, your best player has a poor shooting performance. The rest of your team usually can't overcome it. Football, your quarterback has a bad game. Your defense steps up and beats Alabama in the national title game, and then gives your quarterback a chance to make one great throw towards the end to help you win. I don't know if we remember seeing anything like that in recent vintage. But as far as creating upsets in earlier rounds to create excitement, having, lower seeds maybe facing each other in the semis and helping a team get to the title game that's unexpected as far as that is concerned, I think that's probably more likely to happen in the current format rather than the reseed format. But again, it's going to be the same teams winning every year, no matter what you do.
Coming up on the other side, spring ball is underway. Quarterback battles are going on. Which of these battles across the country have our attention as being intriguing, potentially significant to conference and national championship races? We'll get into all that and more next.
Welcome to Jackie.
It ain't a bunch of NASA scientists right now.
Will you make him an actual coffee, Stephanie?
Jackass Forever, rated R. Now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus.
We want to welcome a brand new podcast to the CBS Sports family. In Soccer We Trust covers the beautiful game, or soccer as we like to call it, from a U.S. perspective. Join hosts former USMNT teammates Jimmy Conrad, Charlie Davies, and Heath Pierce as they bring you a mix of expertise and passion on all things soccer in the United States. Download and follow In Soccer We Trust on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. All right, so the spring practice, every position is open. Every battle is going on. I wanted to make sure that we take some time to look at, a handful, maybe more of the quarterback battles that have really got our attention going on right now. Let's go ahead and let's start with the Clemson Tigers, because they were underway first. They will have their first spring game coming up here in
Mizzou's already done, right? They just had their spring game this past weekend.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Georgia Tech's done too, I think.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Coastal Carolina was actually the first FBS team out there. Getting it, just letting Grayson McCall be a coach on the field. Classic coach on the field for them. All right, so the Clemson Tigers, the headline of this is DJ Uiagalelei going up against Cade Klubnik. We discussed heading into spring practice, a little one-off conversation on an earlier show, that would be the focus of the Clemson spring practice. Early reports said both teams were taking some snaps with the ones. We've gotten some comments from Brandon Streeter on where DJU's strengths and weaknesses have been and continue to be. Have your thoughts changed at all based on the buzz that we've gotten from Clemson? What's the expectation for this quarterback battle, either when you think it's going to end, who you think is going to win it, and what Clemson's offense might look like by the time we get to the fall?
I think it'll still be DJ. I do. I think you have to bet on track record here, and the most recent season was not a good one for him. But I think you also had some questions about some of the offensive coaching going on there at Clemson. We saw a lot of articles ripping their scheme and saying that it was very predictable. Of course, was it predictable when they had Trevor Lawrence and he was crushing everybody? I think they had some really ill-fitting receivers. They all looked exactly the same. They didn't have great diversity of body types in that room. Some offensive line questions as well. DJ was a really, really good high school recruit. He stepped in for Trevor and lit it up in 2 games he played in 2020. I'm still going to bet on DJ. That's probably not a popular opinion, but I'm okay with that. And I like Klubnik too, but he's also going to be a freshman.
Why is it not a popular opinion? You think among Clemson,
I think a lot of people are just out on DJ just from looking at social media.
I think you've got the luxury, if you're Clemson. This is where I kind of might agree with Bud, like if you said, because I think coaches most of the time are going to go with what you know, right? What have you seen? And you kind of know the floor as bad as it can get. And there were some rough games in there. But think about the way last season unfolded. And this is one of the intangibles. You never know how somebody's going to respond, because DJ looked great against Notre Dame, like in a 1-game window, throws for 400 yards, 3 touchdown passes, and we're all raving about him. And then how did things start off last season? He goes against Georgia, pick 6, cost him the game. It was not a good game, which no one really, as great as you thought DJ could be, I think we all would have been like, yeah, he's probably going to play not great versus Georgia's defense, but I don't know. Then maybe our expectation was he was going to. I don't remember what it was, but it was much short in that game. So all of a sudden he starts taking heat and criticism for the first time, and Clemson loses, and all of a sudden they're struggling. And I look at a player whose confidence, like to me, it was just a lot of it was mental. And then you saw him slow down because he wanted to make sure of where he was throwing. And you start thinking that much as a quarterback, and you're not just naturally throwing and cutting it loose, it becomes a very real thing where it impacts your play. So I thought you saw a quarterback who was a shell of what you saw at Notre Dame. To me, it's almost more of a rehabilitation process with DJ mentally building up his confidence. Now, there's a significant difference this season and last season. Last weekend started with Georgia. This season, it's Georgia Tech on the road. Then it's Furman, Louisiana Tech. Wake is probably their first challenge. Like, they could stick with DJ, be 3 or 4-0, start slowly building him up and bring back his confidence, where all of a sudden he's a completely different looking player in a new system with hopefully an offensive line that does a little bit better for him. You know, now they've got Shipley, who they like. Now they have a little bit more of an identity with him, where it could be a little bit more of a steadier ride. And then it's like, all right, can you get that upside again out of DJ? And that's the question. I don't know. Like that's what Clemson has to ultimately decide. All right, are we going to go with the veteran experience with the floor built in, or do we take a swing for the fences? And maybe, and this is where I don't know, maybe you play both quarterbacks, because, you know, I think teams are more willing to do that, especially against a schedule like this where you can win and play them both and figure it out as the season goes on and then let it play itself out in the field. But I think it'll be a good thing for Clemson to actually have a viable option backing up DJ just in case you need to break the glass.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel too, because if you go back to last year, if Clemson has somebody they feel is a viable backup, does DJ start all season? Because
I don't think so.
Yeah, because
didn't
Tyson
Omicron come in?
Omicron played extensive time. I think was it North Carolina? I forget.
He played in 6 games, but he only threw like 19 passes all season long.
Yeah.
So, like, if they feel more comfortable with Klubnik, we might see a shorter leash for DJ going in there. And Fomachan he's still in the transfer portal, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So I don't know. I agree. I think DJU is going to win that job just based on familiarity with the offense and all that kind of stuff. But it's going to be interesting to see how short the leash is. And if he does struggle early in the season, do they quickly go to Klubnik and say, all right, well, let's see what this kid can do, because we've already seen this movie before.
What's in DJ's control? Brandon Streeter's been talking about his footwork all spring. He said when his footwork gets off, his accuracy plummets. You know, like if there's one thing in which I'm unfortunately now every Clemson fan who has not been to quarterback camps is going to be talking about footwork. That's going to be a little frustrating, but here's what that is in his control. Here's what's not in DJ Uiagalelei's control. The story of Cole Stout and the story of Kelly Bryant, because Cole Stout was named the starter and there was an early enrollee, true freshman named Deshaun Watson, who a lot of people were pretty excited about 4 to 5 games into that year. Time to let the freshman get in. Kelly Bryant, he won an ACC championship year before. Came in, was named the starter for the first game of the season. And about, 3-4 games in, time to let the kid in. Trevor Lawrence. Just the experience for the program and the decision-making from Dabo Swinney that has twice taken a superstar blue chip early enrollee true freshman, allowed the veteran to be the starter at the beginning of the year. And then once you get a couple games in, whether it's the performance of the veteran or your confidence in the younger player, let him get out there. Man went 27-0, won back-to-back state championships at the 6A level in Texas. That sounds not exactly like Trevor Lawrence's high school record, but equally impressive when you start to talk about what kind of pedigree you have coming in. And again, Kelly Bryant and Cole Stout and DJ Uiagalelei, like if we're going to compare their pedigrees and their ceiling and their projection, wildly different. But it is the way that Cade falls in line with Trevor and Deshaun, at least in terms of the cycle of the quarterback room. This is not in DJ's control at all, but it is a history that we have with Dabo Swinney's Clemson program at the quarterback position.
Do you think Dabo's learned then? Because Dabo cost Clemson several wins by playing Cole Stout as long as he did. including the Florida State game when Jameis was suspended for standing on the table in the Union. They had to play Sean McGuire. Like, if you look at that game when they're rotating Stout and Deshaun's crushing it, but they're swapping him like every couple series, and Cole Stout can't play, right? Like, Dabo played Cole Stout, who really can't play at an ACC level for a long time. Like, I wonder if he thinks back about those games and says, hey, like,
you'd hope
I messed that up. I should have gone with Deshaun Watson from day one.
Well, that's why you told Kelly Bryant, if you want to transfer, you need to go, because we're going to end up going with Trevor. Like, did Dabo learn? I would guess yes. And I would guess yes, because of the way he handled the Kelly Bryant timing and the messaging to, give him the opportunity to transfer out.
I will say, going back to the comment about DJ's footwork, that's like a new defensive coordinator showing up and saying we're going to be aggressive and we're going to be multiple, because there are graveyards full of college quarterbacks who, if they could just figure out their footwork, would have been much more accurate.
You think we got a best shape of their life check mark as well, Tom?
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, with DJ, we do.
Let's do some.
He's
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is he taking up yoga for flexibility? I'm going to get a check mark on that one, too. Let's play off-season bingo.
Side note, I don't know, I'm sure you guys watched it. The combine, when they had the quarterbacks workout, I was blown away with how bad some of the footwork was. And they were all like, well, it's because they've never gone to center. I don't know what no one is worried about footwork at all anymore. Like, they just don't care. It was atrocious.
You know what it is? Everybody wants to be Patrick Mahomes now.
Yes.
Because Patrick Mahomes is a unicorn who can do incredible things. All these kids coming up are like, yeah, I'm just going to run and throw off platform and go sideways and throw back across my body like Patrick Mahomes. It's like, that works for him. Doesn't really work for anybody else.
It's a great point. It's like when I watch my 9-year-old play basketball and they're all jacking up threes. Girls,
Steph
it's
Curry,
like Steph Curry. We're all going to change. Well, the analytics say they're worth more. It's smarter. I'm like, trust me, it is not smarter to be jacking it up from 3 when you can hardly get it there.
Hey, Caitlin Clark, man, she's out there doing the new just pull up from midcourt, make it rain.
What is 3-point percentage for 9-year-olds?
4.
Is it above 10?
4%? No, absolutely not. No.
My analytics suggest 9-year-olds get within a foot of the rim, get into the lane.
It's about what New Mexico State shot from 3 against Arkansas in a 53
So
to
I've never
48
coached
game.
9-year-old girls basketball, but I assume their free throw percentage is also horrendous?
Outside of 5 feet, yes.
So you really just want to, like, you should just hack everybody, right?
Well, no,
like,
if you have
I'm
somebody
not
who can
allowing any
dribble,
shots to get off. Just
all you
hack.
got to find is a ball handler and then just run. Just go fast break. That's the best thing I've experienced. Yeah. Somebody who can drive and dish and get layups. And if you get fouled, hopefully you make 50%. You're doing all right.
It's like in T-ball, if you have the shortstop who's fast enough to actually run it to first base as opposed to throwing it over there, it's a huge competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Oh man! All right, let's turn our attention to Austin, Texas. Very, very interesting quarterback battle. One spring ago, we were talking about Casey Thompson going up against Hudson Card. Bye, Casey Thompson. Hello, 5-star Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers shows up. Hudson Card now has an opportunity. He never really had full health for last season. There is still, to me, the known commodity of the fact that you had been in Steve Sarkisian's offense. You've been around the program for a little bit, but this one, I think the burning question for me, and I'm curious where y'all are at, the burning question for me is Quinn Ewers as much of a factor in the quarterback competition as he is in the eyes of fans and in the eyes of like general national interest because of who he is, which absolutely to me is more of a star in college football than a lot of quarterbacks who have actually played competitive college football as we head into the 2022 season. How much of this is hype? How much of this is substance? And what are you expecting Steve Sarkisian to do at the quarterback position?
What a transition. Speaking of quarterback footwork, Quinn Ewers. Sorry. I mean, I don't know. I think that this is probably more open than the public realizes because of what you were saying, Chip, with the Quinn Ewers name recognition. But at the same time, it's not unreasonable to think that Quinn Ewers got a lot of money, went to Ohio State, left Ohio State to come to Texas. Is he making that move without at least some assurance that, you're not the starter, but you're going to enter camp as the starter and you got to, keep it?
he's got a long runway left. I don't think that he needed the promise that it would happen in 2022.
But he's already going to be 2 years out of college. So he's going to be draft eligible out of high school. He's going to be draft eligible after, next season. So is he going to only want to play one season before his NFL draft eligibility?
And I think this is where the dynamic there's always been politics at play, and with or without money, with recruits and keeping them there and keeping guys from transferring. But I do think the pressure's ramped up more on Sark to play Quinn Ewers because of the numbers that we've all heard about that he is getting paid. Now, ultimately, Sark has to worry about his job and winning games, and that's all that matters. But I do think it puts an increased pressure on playing Quinn Ewers, and that'll probably be the more likely direction they go.
I really don't know what to expect here. I think if I had to put money on it, I would go Ewers just due to talent, but I don't want that to come off as a slight for Hudson Card. Not that I'm worried about Texas fans, getting at me for slighting Hudson Card. I actually think he's pretty damn talented as well. Like, their quarterback room is really nice there in Austin, and I think it's a huge luxury they have these options. I don't know who's going to win that. I don't have a great feel for that.
What about at Texas A&M, where things have, you've got that you've got a 5-star quarterback, Connor Wegman, coming in from the best recruiting class of all time, and you get Max Johnson after a very productive time with LSU. We still have Haynes King, who was the starting quarterback at the beginning of last season until he got hurt in the second game of the season against Colorado. I think it's easy for me to gravitate towards Max Johnson because Max Johnson's had more success at the SEC level in a way that I think is going to be very translatable from LSU to Texas A&M. We've got the addition of his brother as tight end. I just see the pieces coming together for Jimbo to construct this around Johnson. But I'm anticipating this to be a battle that is going to give both King and Connor a decent shot at this.
It's weird. Like, I'm the recruiting guy, and I didn't even really write down Connor Wegman in this battle.
He's there.
I know he is, but I'm just, and we had him as a 5-star quarterback, number 22 overall player in the country, number 3 quarterback in the class. I'm perhaps wrong about this, but I think this is a Johnson King battle. But it's very difficult to know because we've never really seen Haynes King play for A&M except for like one game against Kent State, and then he hurt his leg in the next one against Colorado, I think it was.
Yep.
So it's a great unknown. We can sit here and speculate about it, and we will because it's March and it's college football season, off season. But do you think Max Johnson would have transferred to a place where he thought it would be really difficult to start? I don't.
His decision also might have been start with option 1, which is get out of Baton Rouge, figure out option 2 later.
I think he thinks he can start,
reckless.
though.
I shouldn't speculate.
I guarantee you he thinks he can start. I would lean more with Bud, where I think it's a 2-man race. I know Jimbo's raved about Haynes King, but it's also convenient to rave about Haynes King and kind of blame an 8-4 season on, we lost our guy who was incredible, and we didn't see him look that great when he played. And I think and I don't know Haynes King, but I know Max Johnson. I know Brad, his dad, and I know the intangibles that he brings to the table, like leadership. And I think, being able to handle a lot on his plate, I think that matters in Jimbo's system as well. But Haynes King's already had a leg up and being there longer. I think this one's more open, but I think there's zero chance we'll know until week 1, because if Max Johnson's the starter, don't you think Haynes King is gone? So this will be one of those long plays for Jimbo. Like, it's tight, super tight. They're right there, neck and neck. We'll have
Jake Coker, Jacob, or Jameis Winston.
Yeah, I mean, you have to keep them both happy. So I don't think we'll know the answer on this one until week 1.
Yeah, here's you look at this battle. Connor Wegman, 5-star, that's great, but freshman, no experience, and we've talked about it a lot of times. But you've talked about it plenty. Like, Jimbo's offense for quarterbacks is not a simple offense. It is an intricate offense that you have to learn. So I think that kind of takes Wegman out of the running right away, because it's hard to imagine with the other competition there that he's going to not only play better than those two, but get a better command of the playbook and the offense and everything he's supposed to do by the time the season starts. But so I do think it's a 2-horse race. And I also think that Haynes King, because of that, having familiarity with that playbook, probably has a slight edge on Johnson heading into the spring, just because he knows more about what he's doing, whereas Max Johnson has just recently transferred and kind of had to take a crash course in this offense, and really in the spring is going to be getting to play in it for the first time and getting to understand it more. So I think Haynes King probably has a slight advantage, but like you just said, Danny, I don't think we're going to have any idea. I don't think Jimbo's going to know, because like with that offense, a couple weeks of spring practice is not going to separate one from the other. So it's probably not going to be until August until we know who the starter is on that very first game. And by the time that game, the first snap, just because that guy's starting doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be the starter.
In some ways, if Haynes King wins the job, it almost makes me feel a little bit better about A&M, because that means he would have, well, for this reason, right? I think we have a decent idea of what Max Johnson, his floor represents. Okay. Like if Haynes King is able to beat him, Max Johnson is a capable starting quarterback in the SEC. Now he may grow into something bigger than that. That's possible, but I think we would all agree he's at least a capable starting quarterback in the SEC. So if he gets beat out, that might mean that Jimbo has hit some gold here with Haynes King for somebody with some serious upside, but also enough floor to where he's confident playing him early in the year and starting him.
Haynes King supposedly can fly too. Like it's a different
he can
type
dunk.
of
He's
quarterback,
a good
like
athlete.
4.4, 4.45 or something like that. So I'm curious to know, like, what does Jimbo want to do? And he's won with both. Like Jameis was very much a pocket passer, and yet Christian Ponder was, running a lot. So I think it'll be interesting to see like how much that plays in the style of play and what Jimbo wants to do ultimately is the guy that he goes with.
We'll come back to the SEC in just a little bit. I want to take our attention out west, where a former SEC West quarterback has landed right in the middle of a quarterback competition. We were looking at Oregon last year and saying, all right, is it going to be Anthony Brown or is it going to be Ty Thompson, the blue chip quarterback coming out of Arizona? Jay Butterfield also was in that conversation as well and remains. Anthony Brown, of course, now gone. And it is Bo Nix from Auburn that shows up. Now, what's significant here, like several other examples that we've seen with transfer quarterbacks, you're linking back up with somebody who coached you before, who knows your skill set. And for Bo Nix, who was the SEC Offensive Rookie of the Year, linking back up with the quarterback coach and offensive coordinator from that freshman season, Kenny Dillingham, over there at Oregon. Dan Lanning, of course, new head coach. Every job is open with the new head coach. But as Bo Nix is showing up and Ty Thompson, remains to be this this fixture of the Oregon fan base all throughout last season, especially earlier on in the season. We never really got to see him. Do you think that, how do you imagine that Bo Nix, Ty Thompson battle? And if you're going to go with Butterfield too, but I wanted to at least be fair to him. But to me, I read this one as a Nix Thompson battle for QB1 in the Oregon offense.
So I think that part of the reason that Oregon took Bo Nix is familiarity. Recall that Kenny Dillingham, as Chip noted, was at Auburn with Bo Nix before he went to Florida State. So I think it's at least a floor take as far as taking him as a transfer. Oregon fans very much believe that Ty Thompson is going to be like the next stud. And Oregon's prior staff would tell you that, but they didn't really play him. Mm-hmm. And that makes me a little skeptical as if he's going to be the guy, but maybe he will be. I think he's more talented than Nix is, but Nix, maybe getting out of the SEC and actually having a little more time to throw away from the pass rush could do him a bit of good, or he could be just totally ruined as far as his pocket presence, right? Like maybe he hasn't had time to develop that playing there at Auburn and being harassed quite a bit by pass rushers. So I think it'll be Nix, because I don't think you go out and take him just to have him ride the bench.
Yeah, and like if you go back to last year, like the Oregon coaching staff raves about Ty Thompson, but like you said, they never played him. And like Mario Cristobal, we know, is somewhat conservative. So maybe the thought process was the kid's ultra talented, but he also makes some mistakes and he gets a little, undisciplined that could put us in a bad spot. So we just want to go with Anthony Brown because we trust that even if we're not explosive, he won't put our defense in bad situations. But I don't see how Bo Nix is going to be a clear improvement on that if that was the problem. So I do think that this is wide open, and this is probably the familiarity with Nix and Nix's familiarity with Dillingham probably made Oregon seem like a very good option for him. And I think that he probably has a slight edge just based on that experience. But I believe Oregon coaches when they say that this competition's wide open this spring. So it's going to be an interesting one to follow.
Oh yeah, it'll be shared reps, like right down the middle. You get ones, both get reps with the ones. I think it's a fair competition. I think it's kind of similar to some other like it's similar to Anthony Richardson. Now he played a little bit more and was given more of an opportunity, but in the end, he really couldn't take that job away from Emory Jones. Same with Ty Thompson, couldn't take the job away from Anthony Brown. I'm always a little bit worried about it when the quarterback they can't beat out, and you're like, well, what does that mean? Now Ty Thompson clearly true freshman, new to the system, but now he's new to another system, and you've got a guy in Bo Nix who played a boatload of games in high school, a boatload of games in the SEC. He's got a lot of experience. I clearly think there is something to the intangibles of Bo Nix, like the leadership value, especially when things are fresh start. He's going to come in there and try to take over the locker room. And sometimes that's hard for a true freshman or even a true sophomore to try to wrestle that away. I mean, it's age is a factor here. And so the Oregon team, I think will look up more to Bo Nix because he's been in those battles more, and they look, they see that. I don't know. I'd lean a slight edge to Bo Nix just because I think he'll pick up the system a little bit faster because of all that experience. But I agree with what you guys are saying. Like from a natural talent ability, Ty Thompson would have to have the edge. But coaches, they, a lot of times, especially early, like who are you going to give that nod to week one and see if they can run with it? They're going to take the option where the worst case scenario and it's not that bad. Bo Nix. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, to your point, the Duck Territory, 24/7 Sports, does a fantastic job of covering Oregon, and Oregon football under Dan Lanning has not decided to go total media blackout. We only, we're not going to allow anyone to see anything. So Duck Territory has a lot of spring practice observations, and some of the notes that have been coming out of that has been from their reporting, a good camaraderie and back and forth between Bo Nix and Ty Thompson, sharing tips, talking to each other between reps, holding on to the microphone, just really being able to. I was encouraged, Danny, to your point, that at least this doesn't seem like it's going to come with nastiness, and that if you're an Oregon fan, you think we are going to get good quarterback play. If we've got our high floor and our unknown ceiling, and they are pushing each other, then we should have a better product at the end, whoever ends up winning the job from what has been a competitive and positive environment throughout spring practice. Shout out to Duck Territory. All right, let's hit from SEC to Pac-12, Pac-12 to the SEC. Jaden Daniels announces that after leaving Arizona State and getting some moving help from his former teammates, that he will be sending those boxes to Baton Rouge. We have had some intrigue, questions, and maybe even some doubts about Brian Kelly and the hire of Mike Denbrock and what that is going to mean for the LSU offense and moving forward. So, but I'll throw this to you first. Does the addition of Jaden Daniels, and he joins a quarterback room where I would say that Miles Brennan, our established veteran, though with some injury issues, Garrett Nussmeier, a little bit more of a question mark, at least in my analysis. He joins a room and he joins a quarterback battle where Jaden Daniels can absolutely win this thing. But yet Jaden Daniels' own career arc as a starting quarterback says that he probably is going to need to fit with all of the pieces, coaching and personnel otherwise, in order to really seize this thing and be QB1 anytime soon.
Yeah, so I don't think you take Jaden Daniels if you have a lot of confidence in your quarterback room, which, of course, that makes some sense. Garrett Nussmeier last year, 50% completions, 3.8 net yards per attempt. That's not going to get it done at all. Like, that's not playable in the SEC if you want to win any games. Now, Miles Brennan in 2020 was actually pretty damn good. 8.4 yards per attempt in SEC play, 60.3%, 11-3 touchdown. Like not great, but that's playable in the SEC. Not super high on the Denbrock hire, as you mentioned, but again, that doesn't really impact, I think, who is going to play QB for them. Daniels has some talent. He was extremely inconsistent at Arizona State. I've already told you what some of the coaches on that staff told me about how they didn't actually like him. And you saw the reaction video. So we'll see if a fresh start there at Arizona State helps him out. But man, if you go and you take a guy like that, you got to be thinking he's a starter, right? Although I kind of think Brennan might be the best player in there. I want to hear Danny's opinion on this, by the way, in addition to Tom's. But obviously, like, Brad and the Johnsons, did they think, like, based on your information, who do you think is maybe the better threat to take the job, Brennan or Nussmeier?
You know what? I need to reach out and find out, because I haven't talked to him about that conversation. The depth chart, like what's going on behind him. So I don't really have a good answer for that with any inside intel. But like, I think it is, the Denbrock hire is interesting because two of these quarterbacks play the game one way, and one who they just signed plays the game a different way. He can run. And I do wonder if that's more of the type of quarterback that Denbrock wants in his system. Somebody who's a little bit more mobile, who they can utilize some of these concepts. And I think we talked about this a little bit before. So I would say it's probably Jaden Daniels would have the edge, but it doesn't mean it's his job. You know what I mean? Yep. And then I'm curious to know, like, the other two. I don't, because I don't think we know that much about either. I think they've been okay, but I think from like an upside thing, like, this is the thing. I think the floor on Jaden Daniels isn't horrendous. Like, I think it's pretty, like, you've seen a lot of football, and I don't know. I think this one's probably one of the more fascinating ones because I think we have three legitimate guys, and like, does that start taking reps? You got to start whittling this thing down fast. So like, we start paying attention to some of the reports coming out of LSU. Who are the guys getting the reps with the ones and the twos, and who's the third out? And then you'll start narrowing it down and start figuring out, all right, who is the two-man battle between? And I think you'll have a better idea.
Yeah, I think it'll end up being Jaden Daniels, just because, like you said, but if he's coming there, I just feel like that's a signal.
But it's also Brian Kelly.
Yeah, they're all going to play. Like, every week. They're going to rotate series, but Jaden Daniels is going to be the starter.
The thing that I love is that Brian Kelly, like, we first started getting on him about this a decade ago. And last season, he was back on his, like,
ain't a damn thing changed.
Yes. No, we're going to go to Drew Pine. We're going to bring in Buckner. We're going to continue to rotate these guys all the way through. I mean, I had expectations that Brian Kelly has always been open-minded towards playing as many quarterbacks as possible. It makes it intriguing, but it also makes me believe that even when we name a starter for week one, we have not seen the end of potential quarterback rotation at LSU if trends from Brian Kelly's coaching career are to continue. And when you've got different skill sets too, Brian Kelly likes that the best, because then he thinks he can keep you off guard with his offensive game plan. All right, let's it was so funny. We talked about Florida. We talked about Emory Jones and, Anthony Richardson. And then right after we're done talking about it, Emory Jones has entered the transfer portal. So I think, Danny, you mentioned it like right off the top. Jack Miller now. You've got Jack Miller and Anthony Richardson. And Anthony Richardson, which has somehow had not miraculous. We've had actual, like, miracles medically done. A ahead of schedule recovery. It was thought at one time that Anthony Richardson would be limited for most, if not all, of spring. And sure enough, he has a couple good checkups right as spring practice is getting going. One of our big headlines is Richardson, will now be able to participate more than expected. The following headline is that Emory Jones is out of here. But I think that we still have to, at least from a handicapping perspective, or at least our expectations for Florida's offense under Billy Napier, we have to think that Jack Miller's got to be ready. Do we think that Jack Miller has a shot at being QB1, even if Richardson is 100% healthy? Or do you think that Emory Jones' exit means that Richardson, who has shown in flashes just some awesome dynamic playmaking, that Jones's exit means that Richardson, here we go, QB1?
No, I think it shows that Emory Jones finally came to the self-awareness that, man,
He was number 30.
yeah. I mean, probably should have done it before. I mean, he was in he was in the transfer portal before the bowl, and then he decided to come back and play. And like, we've seen him play. And you talk about like knowing the floor. We know the floor, but we also know the upside. It's just very, pedestrian, to be honest. I mean, it was just very average quarterback play. And he had a nice drive against Alabama and kept him in that game. And he can play somewhere. But I think the direction that Billy Napier wants to play in this team, maybe that was a conversation he had with Billy Napier. Like, hey, what do you envision my role? And maybe Billy Napier was like, yeah, it's probably going to be more as a backup or a role player, or, and you can just kind of see what's happening. But I think this one is interesting because I think Anthony Richardson, if there wasn't a new system, I think he'd clearly have the leg up. But I think the fact that there's a new regime in there with a new system, everybody's kind of on the same level. So I think it's more of an open competition. And I don't know enough about Jack Miller. I mean, I mentioned to you guys last time, watched the spring game, remember thinking, man, could he challenge CJ Stroud in this spring game? And he played pretty well. But I don't know enough about him. And from Anthony Richardson, like, again, I think Anthony Richardson's kind of similar to what we saw with DJ, where there was so much hype around him. You saw these plays. I think it was USF when he's running like 90-yard, QB draws and like just getting off and making these huge plays. And he had a great start. And then against Georgia, we kind of saw a quarterback who looked overwhelmed when he was given the opportunity. Again, similar to DJ, same team that's making you look bad. And then you kind of didn't see that same version of Anthony Richardson. So clearly, I think the upside is there. But I think he also reminds me more of what Billy Napier ran at Louisiana. So I guess maybe I'd give the leg up to Anthony Richardson on the potential for what he could be, envisioning what Napier did at Louisiana.
I think it's a positive sign for Florida that Jones is transferring, because it means that Florida, like that Jones is not in the quarterback conversation, which to me means the quality of play in that room is going to be elevated. I don't know if it's going to be Jack Miller or Richardson. I would guess it'll be AR-15 because I just think like he's part of your recruiting pitch. He's really freakishly athletic. He's got a big arm. If you can harness that, it's not like what they ran at Louisiana required a lot of precision passing either. So I'm not saying they're going to run the exact same thing they ran at ULL, but it's certainly possible. And I think if I had to put my money on it, I would go AR-15.
I'm going to go Jack Miller. Gut feel.
Let's go.
How many
I
of
know
these?
Ohio State coaches really liked him, but
Okay,
he
all
just
right.
wasn't.
That wasn't just total like Big Ten's better. Jack
No,
Miller.
that was just I know Ohio State coaches liked him, but CJ Stroud is very good and they like him a little bit more. So
Former Ohio State quarterbacks in the SEC have been good in the last 3 years.
it works very well. I think, clearly Jack Miller is going to lead Florida to a national title, and then he's going to save some more bound NFL franchise.
Jacksonville Jaguars quarterback Jack Miller.
Wow, just throw Trevor under the bus.
All right. What about let's real quick other jobs or other places where you're interested in the quarterback competition?
I
You
don't
want me to just throw up a softball for Bud? What about Georgia? Come on. What about the quarterback battle that's unfolding?
No, man.
in
Stetson
Athens?
Bennett is incredibly efficient and
That's
is
right.
extremely productive.
That's right.
I thought one thing I noticed, by the way, I had a ton of notes on that. I think it's
And it is because of him.
Three-part special here on the quarterback battles, is that Georgia is one school. We talked about Clemson. That's two schools. Penn State and Michigan. I also had, I'm sure there's many others where you have a returning quarterback who is like DJ clearly in an open battle for his job. And I don't know if I feel like Stetson Bennett almost has to be the starter, but Kirby's been saying, hey, we need to develop the position. We need to get reps there. But at some of these, I think there's a trend where it used to be if you started, you were kind of just a guy. Like, we're not going to make that change. And I think you've seen a trickle-down effect from the NFL and teams getting aggressive, realizing we can't just have just a guy. Like, we need a playmaker. And so I think at some of these schools, and no
So
coincidence.
Michigan, McCarthy is hurt.
Right.
McCarthy will get a crack at it, but the shoulder injury is going to limit him from competing this spring. So
Right.
that becomes one of those like, all right, we'll punt the conversation till fall, but for now, Caden McNamara is still the guy.
Right.
Here's one for you. What about wait, are we staying on Michigan? My apologies.
No. Go.
No, I just brought up all those that kind
Yeah.
of where there might be intrigue, and it's not, the guy, the starters is not the starter because he's returning.
I have 4 names for Auburn. Is that correct?
Calzada, TJ Finley, and who?
Robbie Ashford and Demetrius Davis.
Okay. I had that one as a Calzada, TJ Finley, and I didn't have very strong feelings about either one of those as like, if you win, I am changing my expectations for you and for the team and the offense.
I mean, if you did have strong feelings about one of those guys, I would about in a good way. I would really be interested in that because I'm in the same boat, Chip. Calzada was just bad last year. He's not accurate overall. He played the game of his life against Alabama, but he's just not an accurate player.
That might be one of the most freakish things I've ever seen is Calzada's performance against Alabama. Like he was slinging it with anticipation, hitting guys in stride and tight windows. It was like, where's this guy?
What's the Will Ferrell movie where he's like, I just blacked out. I don't know how I did that.
Yeah.
The old school. Yeah. Yes, where he does the
yes.
Yeah. 5.8 yards per attempt for Calzada last year, 6 for Finley. So
it's like
both bad.
Baseball's in the spring training. It's like that mid inning reliever who can throw 101 but has absolutely no control. But then there's that one game, like at the end of the season, when you're trying to clinch a playoff spot, where he comes in and he suddenly just strikes out the side and is perfect, and then he's never anything again.
Here's a question for you: Alabama lost to Zach Calzada and Stetson Bennett in the same year. If you were ranking all the quarterbacks that Saban has ever lost to, where do those guys rank on the list?
I think the better question is, having a lower rated quarterback the best way to beat Alabama?
A lot of people are wondering this.
Like
Dr. Bo,
did Tennessee just blow its chance at an SEC title by giving I forgot how to say it already, all that money?
Iamaleava.
Did they blow their chance by paying Nico?
Well, the old Gary Danielson standard was to say that you needed the Steven Garcia game. He would always go back to South Carolina, and Steven Garcia was like 22 for 28 or 18 for 22. He's like, you just needed to be a Steven Garcia and then have all the other pieces around to be, have an Alshon Jeffrey, like have the other pieces that you need to be able to beat Alabama. And I always thought that Steven Garcia, in the fact that he was always referenced there, the notion was that he was on the low end of the quarterbacks to beat Alabama.
The consistent factor in beating Nick Saban's Alabama teams is not quarterback, and it's not quarterback mobility. It is almost always receiver play.
Mm-hmm.
Because of how they do that defense, there are so many opportunities for one-on-ones, and it's essentially ISO ball. Is your receiver going to be able to beat a 5-star, because they're almost always 5-stars, defensive back trained by Nick Saban in one-on-one coverage enough times before Bama adjusts for it and says, fine, we can't cover you?
And can you get it to that guy before you get killed by a future number 1 draft pick or something, first round draft pick?
The guy on the Steven Garcia team.
Was it Jeffrey?
Yeah, it was Alshon Jeffrey. Yeah,
he was pumping gas that day, my friends.
So other ones, I guess, that I had on my list. We already mentioned Florida, mentioned Auburn, LSU, Notre Dame. I've kind of a little bit of a shrug there. Buckner.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like it's one of those things with Marcus Freeman now being in charge. I don't know. Like I think obviously it's probably going to be Tommy Rees's decision, but I don't know. I feel like those are two very similar players, so it really could come down to just who does better in the spring and in practice.
I think they are in a position where I have, unlike some of these other, like the Auburn position, where I'm not going to change my confidence or my expectation level, but maybe not in the positive sense. Notre Dame's in a place where it's like, all right, well, whatever you think is going to be better, you're going to have basically the same medium high to high-ish expectations for the Fighting Irish either way. So it's a good position to be in where it doesn't feel like all of your hope is riding on Buckner being the quarterback or Drew Pine being the quarterback. Doesn't seem to hold as much intrigue, at least in my eyes, as I scan the country.
That's going to be intangibles. I just think that physically they're very similar.
Good stuff. You can follow him on Twitter at Danny Cannell. You can follow him at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. We will next show do a little bit of a review, see who's been tearing it up in our bracket challenge. And to those of you who engaged with our email thread of love over the last week or so, we really appreciate the engagement. Oh man, Tom,
please stop responding. It's really making Coca angry.
Really, like, if anybody else, the competition is still ongoing to see who gets $100 Paramount Plus gift card. Maybe we can, just don't respond because it makes producer Coca really angry. They keep having to deal with these emails in the bracket games, but seriously, to all the listeners and everybody who signed up, we very much appreciate you doing that. We have enjoyed being able to take our March Madness to the bracket games with you. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Shout out to Mike DeLong, who's currently in the lead.